Welcome to the Podcast Discovery Show, the podcast about other podcasts, where each week we dive deep into a podcast and discuss all the things that we thought about and listened to and heard about and made us feel happy with. I'm Josh.
I'm Kirk.
And I am Zach.
And this week we are talking about a recommendation that was given to us directly from the man himself, Glynn Washington, the host and creator of Snap Judgment. And he recommended 4 different episodes of Snap Judgment. And we picked one. We picked Gambit. And so that is the episode that we are going to discuss today.
Yeah, this all came from when Kirk was sending out messages to everyone, just asking for just recommendations from some of our favorite shows. He basically picked any large podcaster he could and sent him a message like we were important people and said, hey, we're looking for recommendations. And he sent over this one. And if you've never heard Snap Judgment before, it is a fantastic storytelling podcast. They have done a great job for a long time now. How many episodes are they at?
They don't number them anymore. Like, it doesn't show a number. But, I mean, I've been listening to them since I was farming. So that's like 5 years ago. And they weren't new, and I heard them there.
So yeah, they've been doing this for a long time, and they call it storytelling with a beat. So underneath all of their stories, they usually have kind of it's not high, like loud or anything like that. It's not really high energy, but it just kind of pushes the story along. It kind of adds a little bit to it. And they find just really great stories. There's been many episodes we've talked about on the show, from the spooked episodes to just randomly pointing it out. But when he actually responds to what we're saying, we definitely want to cover one of the ones that he personally liked. And he actually set this up by saying, trying to pick my favorite Snapped episode is like trying to pick a favorite child. It's really hard to do. But then he picked 3 of them. So if he has children, they should watch out, because he can pick favorites if he needs to, if he's back against the wall.
Yeah, and I reached out to Zach and Kirk this week and said, hey, you guys want me to join on an episode? Because I know they were doing their anniversary or 100 episodes-ish celebration. And they're like, yeah, join the one where we talk about Snap Judgment. After Kirk wrapped up the episode last week saying, Josh hates Snap Judgment. And so I love that they invited me specifically for this episode. However, I think it actually is perfect timing, because I looked at it with a new lens when I listened to it today. Historically, like, it's not my favorite podcast before. Like I mentioned this last time, it wasn't my favorite podcast. But I get it. I get its popularity. I understand why people like it. However, I looked at it with a new lens now. And I think it's because I've been reading East of Eden, which is a phenomenal kind of like classic literature book. And the prose and the writing style and how he says things is like almost kind of like musical throughout the whole book. And it's just absolutely phenomenal. So I've been thinking about kind of prose and like how things are said and kind of the weight that things carry by saying it one way versus another. And then realizing when listening to Snap Judgment today that it's kind of prose, but you take it into an audio medium and then you layer music into it. So it's just taking that idea of having good prose, of like telling a story in a very concise, specific way that gets maximum impact, and then layering in music and layering in tone of voice and layering in all the sound effects. And you get like a really powerful effect from it. And looking at it from that perspective, I enjoyed it significantly better, because I was looking at it for, hey, here's a great story. And a lot of times the stories are okay, but it's not like, oh, this is the craziest story I've ever heard. It's the story with the prose that they're using and the music layered underneath. It gives you a more emotional impact. And so kind of looking at it with that new lens completely changed my mindset on the podcast. And I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. And I would say that a lot of that is essentially, it's not the story, it's the storytelling. And that's what Snap Judgment is fantastic at doing.
Mm-hmm.
They've always done a great job at kind of immersing you in whatever they're talking about. Because even while we were listening to this today, you kind of hear some of these stories and you're like, there's not a ton going on, but that's how you can always tell a good storyteller. If they can tell a story where there's not a lot going on, and it's not the most insane story you've ever heard, but still you listen and it impacts you in a way that it shouldn't, based on what the actual content of the story is, that means it's a good storytelling.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, the whole episode starts, and this is always one of my favorite parts of the show. And I will say I nerd out. And have I told you guys about the time that I met Glynn Washington?
We have talked about it many times.
But I think he probably is one of my favorite. I guess people. I look up to him a lot, but it's because he has this ability to tell a story that, even if it's the most mundane, like it started off with him telling a story about playing chess, literally playing chess, and there was no giant payoff, but the way he told the story, you were into it, you were riveted, you were listening, and that's what makes an amazing storyteller to me.
And that's really the whole book of East of Eden. Like, you'll read like 3 chapters and nothing actually really happens, but you feel really good about it and enthralled in everything that he's saying. It's absolutely crazy. So that's, I think, why it resonated with me, because I'm in that mindset right now.
Yeah, I'm reading that book as well, and I've gotten lost multiple times because my mind will wander, and I'm like, dang it, they're talking about a different family? What family are they talking about? Because it's all these like, this person was a bad person to this person.
Yeah. It's especially the first couple chapters.
Yeah,
the first couple chapters are very like, this family was this, and this person's daughter was this person, and this daughter was like this, and this son was like this.
Yeah, it's kind of like a genealogies.
It really does get into some of that, but it's great. I highly recommend it. I'm like 75% of the way through, and probably one of the best books I've ever read. But okay, so on the chess story, they ended that chess story basically saying, you got to look back, you got to look at the whole board. You're thinking too much. You got to look at the whole board.
Mm-hmm.
What did you guys take away from that? What was that saying to you?
I was doing 14 things at the same time, so I wasn't really trying to dig too deep into what the metaphor was there. What did it mean something to you in particular?
No, I've been thinking about it, and I think there's a lot to take away from it. Yeah. I think it's like a lot of times in our day to day, we're so focused on the day to day, we're not looking at the big picture. So like, you could have a perfect day planned out, but you're still not going in the right direction. You're still not winning because you're not looking at the big picture. I think that's a pretty easy takeaway, but I think there's more layers there.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of metaphor kind of in that area, not seeing the forest for the trees. That entire idea of being so close to a painting you can't even see what it is anymore. Mm-hmm. So I think that it's just trying to, and I think you're right. A lot of times it would be kind of like, don't get too bogged down in the minutia, and know that when I think about that, I always think about, somebody said, I can't even remember where the exact context was anymore, but they said essentially to kind of try and relax yourself when you're going through a day-to-day life. When something happens that drives you up a wall, you think about, is this going to matter to me in 7 years? Is this going to matter to me in 7 months? Is this going to matter to me in 7 days, 7 hours, 7 seconds? And it helps you kind of put individual things into a category that's more fitting than like reacting purely. So I think a lot of those things could kind of play into what he meant there, where you're just trying to change that perspective a little bit.
Yeah.
No, I like that. I think you've mentioned that before, but I need to actually do that in practice. Like, because there's a lot of things that happen in day-to-day life, even if it's just small stuff. And usually it's the opposite. My worst days are when a bunch of tiny little things go wrong most of the time. It's just like, oh, I just want today to be over. Every little thing is just going to crap. And I get in my own head, and then I have a bad day. But yeah, I need to think from that mindset of, hey, this doesn't really matter in the large scheme of things.
It's almost like when it's a really big thing that happens, you feel like, this is a big bad thing that happened. I feel okay being upset by it. But if it's like a small thing, like you wake up and your neck has got a big cramp in it, you're like, this is a small thing and it's going to make me angry all day, but it doesn't impact anything in the long run. So it's just a small annoyance that just means nothing in the grand scheme of things. It's almost more annoying because it doesn't mean anything. It's just annoying.
It's just there to bother you. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, so they start out with kind of that, just a little simple story, but even from this conversation we had, they just drop kind of little thoughts in your head. They're very effective at picking the stories that, even though they seem kind of simple, it's got potential to like mean something to people and to make you think about something else. But then the next two stories are less so of that. It's much more intense story typically. So the second one is about a guy who wrote a song. And
John Fusile. And I titled it Earworm. I don't even know if that's what they called it, but that's what I called it.
Thoughts on it was called Life on Easy Street.
Yeah,
yeah,
John
the
Fusile was the
song.
one that
Mhm.
was the producer that did this segment. It was Jim Bianco, who was the singer-songwriter. My bad.
And yeah, so this entire one is about somebody writing a song that was largely obscure for most of the time. He wrote just kind of a feel good song that was a little bit goofy. He talked about kind of one of the interesting things that stuck out to me in this one is because I've heard it a lot, and it's something that I hadn't really thought about before like I'd started hearing this, cuz like when I've talked to some people for Creators Cove, they say like, "Oh, I just kind of was doing X one day. I was doing the dishes and this melody popped into my head." And I think that's something that singer-songwriters have. It just kind of at some point you kind of just like hear something. You hear something just kind of out of nowhere, out of your mind. And they end up wanting to like chase that down to try and refine that into a song. And so that was an interesting thing that I immediately heard there. I was like, okay, so this just happens to singer songwriters. They just think in melodies and they hear music in their head.
One of the funny things is that's happened to me. And when he said that, I realized it's happened to me, but I have zero vocabulary and zero capability to translate it into anything. So there's been a couple of times in my life where I'm like, oh, yeah, I got this sweet jam in my head. And I was like, well, there's nothing I can ever do with that. So that's just for me.
Well, here it is. Here it is in my brain. But yeah, so he writes this song. He puts this song out. And I don't think that he really did anything with it. It was kind of there. It didn't hit in any big way. And he literally was flipping houses. He had essentially moved out of that whole career path and was working in real estate, and he was just doing things. And then The Walking Dead TV show approached him to use this song, and it started this whole crazy chain of events that how do you ever like, can you imagine the position this guy was in where his song that was largely obscure went in a direction he was never anticipating?
Yeah, and this was when The Walking Dead was still like super popular, like number one in the ratings and stuff like that. And if he's like, well, yeah, sure, use it. And I guess he didn't like read up on what they were planning on using it for, because he said apparently it was written in there. But I remember this episode. Did either of you guys watch this episode?
I stopped after like season 2 or 3 of The Walking Dead.
I think this may have been the beginning of season 3, maybe season 4, but I swear it was episode 1. So it was like everyone that's been watching the show is making sure they tune in to see how this next season is going to start. And they play this song, like they said 9 times. And it's just over and over because they show the monotony and the torture that they're doing to Daryl. And it's disturbing. And the song gets stuck in your head, and the rest of the episode, you can't stop hearing it.
That's
And
such good writing because they basically they expose the audience to a piece of the torture that he was going through. And I mean,
Yeah, and
that's
it
just
got to
such
him.
brilliant writing. Yeah.
Yeah, no, they semi-tortured their audience, and they continue to do that for the remaining however many seasons they did.
Yeah.
it was a different kind of torture later on. I stopped watching, I think, after that. I think that was the last season I watched. It used to be an amazing show. I really liked it. I mean, it was
early
gory
seasons
and
were
stuff,
good.
but it was good. It got too repetitive, I feel like.
Sure.
Oh, we escaped this band of bad people. Now
Now we're safe.
It's a beautiful town of safeness. Oh, these are bad people too. it's just, I don't know. It just happens. It got to be too much formulaic.
Yeah,
was the way
it
I would
was.
put it.
I don't know. They had promise, but so his show or The Walking Dead features his song, and it blows up. It gets to really high on the charts. Everybody's talking about it. It becomes essentially what we call now viral, and it out of nowhere, his song, which was doing nothing, exploded. But then it took another turn. I really like this story because it's just insane to think about like what he was thinking as this was happening. after all this happens, then I believe it was at one of the ICE camps on the border. They were playing this constantly overnight just to what
No,
is
it's people
happening?
protesting in Portland.
That was the second one. First, it was ICE.
No,
Yeah.
it was
Yeah,
people
that's
in
what it was.
Portland protesting ICE, correct?
Oh, it was
It
in
was.
Portland the whole
Yep.
time.
It was
Yeah.
back in 2018 when there was all those kind of conversations going around with the border patrol people treating the people at the border terribly, and like the concentration camps and everything else they were doing. Like ICE was like really messing people up, so they had all these people camped out in front of ICE in Portland.
And then they started playing this song over and over and over again. They said it was like they said it was like 12 hours overnight. They were just blaring this song at people. And so now the song went from obscurity to some weird popularity based on TV show to literally being psychological warfare against protesters by a government agency. And it's one of the wilder paths I could possibly imagine for a song. I don't know how you really beat that. But then they go on to kind of like, they talk about essentially it was co-opted by the protesters themselves and kind of used their Jim
Some
ended up
people literally had PTSD because they had experienced being brutally arrested during this whole time, and they had that, that song as a sensory memory, and when they would hear it, it would kind of trigger it. So that was crazy and horrible.
Yeah, and one of the things that, like, in light of kind of what's been going on across the country for the past couple months, I had not realized that peaceful protesters had been attacked by government agencies like this prior to the past couple of months. I thought that was like a new thing and just started popping up, but I just hadn't been paying attention. And to see that this has been going on for a couple of years and that they're abusing their power that way is just sad. It really is. And their defense was, "Oh, we were just listening to that for us."
Yeah, clear lie. Yeah, clear lie.
That was so ridiculous.
But
Like,
they
just
said they
such
wouldn't do it again because they didn't want to get sued, I guess. They didn't want to make national news. But yeah, they said they wouldn't do it again. They said it was just a couple of random people who happened to be listening to it. And yeah, so the actual songwriter obviously sent a cease and desist to them for doing that. And I don't know, it just kind of became this weird thing. It started out as kind of like a anti-protesting thing, but then the protesters took it over and made it like a pro-protesting kind of statement. So it was just crazy to hear this song get a life of its own. To hear,
and it's such like an upbeat, like,
oh, it makes no sense in any of the context it's in. Like you'll have to listen to this. What's it called? Life on Easy Street.
It is an earworm. It's a song that will get stuck in your head. Yeah, it's Easy Street, I think is the name of the song, maybe, or Life on Easy Street. I don't know.
And they mentioned it in there. It almost sounds like a song you would hear on a children's show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes no sense in the context it was used in pretty much any of these situations.
It sounds like the theme song for like a kid's Disney show is what it sounds like.
But let's be honest, most songs that would feel like torture are songs like that. Like, okay, so we talked about what would be the song that would torture us, or that we would torture our enemies with. I don't like it that way, but what would really bother us? That's the way I'm going to put it. What would be the thing that if someone used it on us, it would really torture us? For me, it would be Baby Shark. I hate that song.
Baby Shark,
so
I would be surprised if Baby Shark wasn't actually used. I would
No,
be
it
surprised.
was here in Florida. It was here in Florida. There was a Florida man story about, I think it was homeless people that kept sleeping at this gazebo in this park. And so, like, this politician started playing that at the gazebo all night long. So it has been used as a deterrent.
Every one of these, it's not a good usage. Like, it's never like, oh, they did it for fun. They did it to fun mess with somebody. No, it's always terrible. I'm trying to think.
What would be the song that would really bother you, Josh?
I mean, I think I can name a handful that would be bad off the top of my head. Disturbed, Down with the Sickness would be a
Oh
good one.
yeah, that'd be
Uh,
terrible.
and then I think also like Gangnam Style, because it's so high energy. I think it would be exhausting
Yeah.
after listening to it on repeat for a long enough amount of time.
What about Photograph by Nickelback?
Oh God, yeah. I have
There
I
was
been
guys.
tortured by that
There
before?
was
Like I
a guy,
feel I had a feeling when you said those words.
the
Like
guy, the guy
I
from the
didn't
Bad
like it.
Christian podcast did that. Kirk. He listened to Nickelback on repeat for 24 hours straight.
Yeah,
I forgot he said he did that.
Yeah,
that's
I'm trying to
ridiculous.
think. Yeah, no, all of those would be pretty bad. I'm trying to think of somebody that's just like it's so.
So I'll name some other ones that the United States has used in the past. Barney the Dinosaur, Sesame Street, um, the Real Slim Shady, the Meow Mix theme song.
Meow Mix.
Uh,
Meow Mix is good. That's
that
evil
one
genius. Like,
that one's pretty bad. And
Well,
there was some other ones, definitely some like metal and stuff. I think they used it even like on the siege of Waco. I remember I watched the documentary and I had also heard a lot of stories about it as well that they used it there. It's it's just insane.
I mean, the guy that came up with the Meow Mix theme song to use that way, I swear he did the Austin Powers like pinky to his cheek thing, like whoa, yeah.
yeah, yeah. That song.
I
As soon
mean,
as
you
you
don't
said that,
forget
I
it
could
when
hear
the
it.
commercial comes on. I mean, it comes on and you're like, oh God, it's gonna be in my head the rest of the night, and I don't want it to be, but it is. It is gonna be because it's meow 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 over and over.
It
You know
is.
it's in your head right now. It just is.
No, I heard it as soon as you said it, and I heard it in my head the second you said it.
Can we play that as our outro?
I wish, but I think we get a takedown. They're very concerned about it. Actually, no, they probably love it. It's just free
Let's just
advertising
sing
from
it.
Yamix.
Let's sing it in a round. That's basically what it is.
But yeah, no, it was a crazy story, and I can't imagine because at one point he said like, I knew at this point that I had lost control, and like I had never really thought of it that way. Where like, okay, he made something, and then it is doing something else now. He has no, it's not normal popularity. It's this own thing that's got a life of its own, and it's just crazy to think about. So it was a really cool one.
And when it was on The Walking Dead, it hit number 6 on iTunes and like number 1 on Spotify trending or something like that. It was big. Like it's I didn't never hear
Oh,
it
that
like in the
show was a
wild.
monster. Like that show had so many viewers for so long.
But I'm just saying I never heard that song in the wild, but apparently it like shot up for a very short period of time because of, that exposure. So then the second story, I really like that second story. It hit me in the feels a little bit though, man. I
Oh
felt so
yeah.
bad for the kid.
No, yeah. No, I feel like if you don't feel bad for this kid, there's something wrong with your brain/heart.
It was the story of little Gus Lee. And it's this story of this little Asian kid that he thought his mom was, going to visit family or something like that. And she was going to come home. She never did.
And I didn't
And like
really get any of that. Like what was going on with his like dad? Like
He found a new woman
because she got sick or because she died?
because she died.
probably because she died, but they had never told the little boy. So he's just assuming he was little, like he was like 7 years old when this all started. And he lived in sounds like a fairly rough area because he would get beat up like every single day. And
I
don't
put
know,
a lot of that on the stepmother who sounds like a Disney villain level terrible.
guys, we definitely can't say the name, but did this make you think of a friend of ours that had a very
Yes.
similar
Yes,
situation?
it did.
And it made me even more mad. It was infuriating. She would like lock him out of the house, and he wasn't allowed to come back home until she like whistled out the window that he was allowed to come back in the house. So he would have to be
While
outside
he was
all day
being
long.
beaten outside.
It was just intense, and specifically by one big kid. So it was basically kind of like a Karate Kid story in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the worst part outside of the physical abuse and keeping him outside of the house was the emotional and psychological abuse of basically trying to erase his culture by saying you can't speak Chinese, we can't eat Chinese food, we can do nothing, and it's absolutely brutal. Like just trying to erase a child's culture like that when they're a kid, and even like you can't practice Chinese in the bathroom. If I hear you doing it, you're going to be in trouble. It's just
Yeah, no,
depraved.
the stepmother in this story sounds the worst. Like, and that's the thing, is you have to feel for this kid. Like, he was clearly traumatized and then just abandoned essentially. And so yeah, he's getting beat up constantly. And at one point, just I guess somebody that kind of knew his family was just around recommended that he go to the YMCA and take some boxing classes. And
Yeah.
that was the turn. That was the turn for him.
Yeah, I mean, it was funny because the guy saw him get beat up so many times, so he's like, went to the dad. He like knocked on the door and told the dad, "Hey, if you don't let your kid learn how to fight, he's gonna get killed. Like he's gonna get killed in the streets because he is always getting his butt whipped." And it was kind of comical in a way how like inept this little kid was. Like it even says like he was 7, but he looked like he was 5, but he acted like he was 3.
Yeah.
He says that. Um, so he was physically small. He didn't speak English very well at all. Which, by the way, if this was him telling the story, which I believe it was, he
It
speaks
was.
amazing English
Yeah,
now.
he's fluent now, for sure.
He's written 9 books, so this is based off of a book he wrote in like '91, I think.
Yeah, and I can see why. And I will say this, when someone goes through, and we've talked about this, and there's the whole, Malcolm Gladwell thing that we've talked about as well with Outliers, but I feel like there are people that have come through really, really, really bad scenarios like this and have fought very difficultly and hard to get out of it. And, this is one of those stories. Now he's like a motivational speaker and author, and it's amazing.
Yeah. So he starts boxing training. A coach really relates to him, even though he's like terrified of the whole situation. They start feeding him and doing the things like his parents should have done. And they start teaching him how to fight. And he starts to find like his place and his stride a little bit of confidence.
I
And it,
love the first time they put him in the ring and the
Oh
bell
yeah,
rang and he literally just jumped out of the ring and ran into a wall and knocked himself out.
that's what I was saying. It was kind of comical how inept he was
Yeah.
at fighting at first.
Yeah, no, it's a very fun story to listen to him tell, because now you can hear the end. Like it is a sad story, but you know that the ending is better than the beginning. So it makes it so that like kind of you're following this kid who just should not have been exposed to everything that he was exposed to. And yeah, even how his stepmother like revealed that his mom has died was just like the worst. Like, she is the worst person. Everything about what she did was like, how are you like this?
Yeah, I think that if I were to hear any like really bad emotions in his voice, I would have just started bawling because it was such a horrible story. Luckily, it sounds like he's really gotten through it well, but that part was like, oh, it was just horrible. Because he even says, he's like, she knew this basically from the beginning, and she was waiting for the exact moment where she wanted to break me and kind of like destroy my world. And she found it, and then she just like, your mom's dead. She even had his sister tell him.
Yeah.
It was
And it
so
was
sad.
and it was when he was starting to make progress and started to get his feet underneath him, she basically just kicked his feet out from underneath him. And he said like even after that he spiraled back into depression. Um, and it took kind of the boxing coaches to force him out of it, to get him back on his feet, to start moving forward again, and said, "Hey, you need a victory." And I just love how this, like, again, just amazing storytelling here, where he conquered his personal kind of self doubt. He physically fought and conquered the bully. And then he verbally conquered his stepmother and said, "I don't know why you're bullying me, but you're not going to bully me anymore."
Yeah. So you're not my mom, and you're not going to bully me anymore.
Yep.
And it sounded like he summoned all his strength by thinking about his mom in that moment when he like fights the bully. So it
Yep.
really is. It's just
It,
great storytelling.
and
It's
I love that it subverts the cliche like, oh, he's going to go be a boxer, he's going to get strong, and then he's going to use his strength to win. It wasn't about the boxing or being strong. It was about the emotional strength
Mm-hmm.
and the mental fortitude. That's what won both of those victories for him.
Yeah, it was about a kid who should not have gone through anything that he had to go through, and it made him strong.
But overall, I mean, it was an amazing episode. I get why Glynn Washington wanted to recommend it. Did we mention that Glynn Washington recommended this episode? Because he did. I just wanted to say that again. But no, honestly, I did feel honored, and it meant a lot to me that he took the time to answer us, because there's a lot of
Yeah.
people that did not.
Yeah, no, it was really nice of him to do that.
We really appreciate it, and
we're huge fans of Snap Judgment.
Yep. So, Zach, I believe that you have the audio for our recommendation for this week.
I do. So we reached out to another one of the Podfix shows. This one is called It's Not Rocket Surgery, a really awesome show that is both a podcast and on the radio in Australia. And Vlado is a lot of times hanging out in our chat, and he's in the Podcast Discovery Club. So we reached out so we could get a review from him. So this is his recommendation for next week.
Good day, guys. It's Vlado from It's Not Rocket Surgery, giving you a review on In Machines We Trust, a new podcast I discovered just the other day, and it's brand new. It came out on the 12th of August, comes via the MIT Technology Review. The creator is Jennifer Strong, known for her stuff that she's done on Future of Everything, a Wall Street Journal podcast. This is a 4-episode podcast series about the use and misuse of artificial intelligence, predominantly in the facial recognition area, and how it's being used already by law enforcement and companies and social media. It's extremely well written podcast. Production values are what you'd expect of MIT from somebody who works for the Wall Street Journal and their podcasts. Very informative, easy to listen to. 4 20-minute episodes that looks into, as I said, the artificial intelligence use of facial recognition, and some interesting stories of how it's affecting people's lives already. Quite insightful, quite scary in some instances. But yeah, you'll definitely learn a lot from these 80 minutes of podcasting. Yeah, so the first episode goes into when artificial intelligence gets it wrong. So it looks at a case study where somebody's falsely accused of robbery and law enfortement misusing it. So and the follow-up, and it just goes further in depth with the episodes 2, 3, and 4. Land of a Billion Faces. What happens in Vegas is captured on camera, and who owns your face. So if you've got 80 minutes and you're interested in artificial intelligence, technology, privacy, law enforcement, social media, all those sort of things, well worth checking out In Machines We Trust.
So yeah, thanks so much, Vlado, for recommending In Machines We Trust. He recommended all 4 so that we could essentially talk about 80 minutes of podcast. That's not too bad, but it's an awesome idea to try and explore a technology that it's kind of on the rise. We're seeing how it could be used in a lot of different ways, and with that comes the ways it should not be used. So it should be really cool to check out the recommendation. We appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I'm excited and also terrified, because I feel like this is one of those things that I'm going to be like, I kind of wish I didn't know this.
Sure.
Because now I'm going to see it everywhere and it's going to bother me. But it's also probably better to know and be aware.
I agree.
Well, Josh, thank you for being our guest host on our 100-ish celebration. You were one of the OGs, and we miss you.
I would like you to call me your ghost from now on, the portmanteau of guest host. Ghost.
Okay.
Sure.
You are our ghost.
Yeah, you
The
can be,
ghost of
you can be
Pods
the
Past.
ghost. But yeah, that's all for this week. And remember,
There's always more to discover.
Yeah.
thank you for listening to the Podcast Discovery Show. We have a few things we'd like to tell you. First, we would love to hear from you on Twitter at the PDS Official or in our Facebook group, the Podcast Discovery Club.
Secondly, leaving a rating or review on iTunes helps tremendously in giving us visibility and also visibility to the podcast that we recommend. You can also check out our Patreon page to get exclusive bloopers, old episode archives, and other exclusive content while supporting the show.
Finally, seriously, get in touch. We'd love to hear from you about what you love about podcasts. And thank you for being a part of all of the things that we do.
This was a podcast from the Podfix Network. You can check out more shows like it at podfixnetwork.com.